Lindsay Eklund was born on July 22, 1980 in the American city of Platini, California. The girl was the youngest child in the family. She had two older brothers, with whom Lindsay was very close. At an early age, the girl and her mother were involved in a car accident that seriously injured Lindsay. For a month she was in a coma, and doctors made disappointing predictions. However, the girl went on the mend, although the accident led to serious consequences for her health. Her left arm and right leg had partially lost their mobility. Despite this, Lindsay lived a full and happy life. She was very fond of animals and tried to help them from her school years. The girl worked as a volunteer in local shelters for a long time, making every effort to change their lives for the better. In addition, in high school, she began to donate her blood for people in need. She even had to deceive doctors about her age, since only adults could donate blood. When Lindsay was in high school, her parents divorced. The girl's father moved to another state with her brothers, and Lindsay stayed with her mother. The girl had a hard time with this event, but thanks to this, she became even closer to her mother. After school, the girl went to college at the Faculty of Journalism. She chose an educational institution near her home and stayed with her mother. Lindsay also began working part-time as a children's tutor, as she knew the school curriculum perfectly. On February 16, 2001, when she was 20 years old, she decided to go with friends to San Diego, which was about an hour and a half away. They planned to visit local clubs and go back in the morning. Lindsay decided not to tell her mom about it so she wouldn't worry about her. Instead, she said she would stay overnight at a friend's house. In the evening, friends came to pick her up, and together they went to a neighboring city. The next day, Lindsay had to conduct a lesson with one of the girls, for whom she worked as a tutor. Her mother expected her daughter to return home after that, but time passed, but Lindsay still did not appear. Her mother could not contact her because she did not have a cell phone. She began to worry and decided to drive to that girl's house to see if her daughter had come today. To her surprise, Lindsay didn't show up. It was very strange, because the girl always treated her work with maximum responsibility. After waiting for some time, the mother decided to go to the police. The officers were in no hurry to start searching, since Lindsay was 20 years old. They suggested that the girl was just sleeping somewhere after a fun evening with friends, and suggested that her mother wait more. However, the woman insisted that Lindsay would never miss a job. She also told them about the girl's health problems caused by the accident. The mother admitted that something bad could happen to her daughter, including because of her limited mobility. As a result, the police agreed to accept a missing person report and began an investigation. First of all, they contacted a Lindsay guy named Matthew. Upon learning of her disappearance, he said that in fact the girl went to San Diego and did not stay overnight with a friend. For her mother, this information came as a big shock and only added cause for concern. The guy added that Lindsay went there with two friends and one friend who was driving. The girl's mother remembered that on the day of departure, a young man whom she did not know really stopped by for her daughter. Matthew told the police the names of all these friends and they went to them. Two friends of Lindsay said that the company planned to visit several clubs in San Diego that evening. However, they faced a problem. Given that some of them were not yet 21 years old, they were not allowed into the establishments where they wanted to go. In the end, they decided to go back. The company arrived in their city at about 4 a.m. According to a guy named Chris, who was driving, he first dropped off two friends, and then drove Lindsay to her house and drove to his place. The young man added that the girl asked him to stop the car about 50 meters from the house so that her mother would not wake up from the noise and headlights. This story seemed a little strange to the investigator, but after the police talked to many of Lindsay's friends, they learned that the girl often asked them to do the same. If she returned home late, she asked to be dropped off at the beginning of the street. Nevertheless, the police continued to treat Chris with suspicion. As he saw Lindsay last, they tried to check his history and found an ATM with a camera located near his house. After reviewing the footage, investigators did see Chris's white pickup truck heading towards the house. This happened at 4:15, which completely coincided with the story of the young man and his girlfriends. The guy also agreed to let them inspect his pickup truck, and the police did not find anything suspicious there. Thus, Chris was no longer considered as a suspect. The police continued to interview Lindsay's acquaintances and look for other clues. However, the girl's whereabouts were still unknown. A week after her disappearance, the police had a rather strange tip. A man named Marty came to work for Lindsay's mother and asked her where the girl had gone. He also said that he had to give her money and left his mother an envelope in which there were $250. Investigators immediately wanted to talk to the man. He told them that he and Lindsay had known each other for a long time. According to the man, he sometimes drove her on business and tried to help her. One day, Marty noticed her walking along the sidewalk with several flower pots. It was clear that the girls were given this with difficulty, given her injuries. Then he stopped and offered to let her down, after which they continued to communicate. Some of the girl's acquaintances, including her boyfriend, knew about this man. However, Lindsay never delved into the details of their relationship. The police reacted to Marty with suspicion. Firstly, the man was 58 years old, and his friendship with a 20-year-old girl seemed strange. And secondly, the investigators found out that he introduced himself to her under an assumed name. Marty explained that he didn't want Lindsay to find out about his family. At the same time, the man insisted that there had never been a romantic relationship between them. According to him, he just tried to help her sometimes, given the state of health of the girl due to the consequences of the accident. For example, he drove her in his car because Lindsay could not drive on her own. Marty also assured that he had nothing to do with the girl's trip to San Diego. According to him, he drove her on business in the morning of that day and they never saw each other again. All this seemed strange to the police. Soon they had another interesting clue. Marty mentioned that he drove Lindsay to San Diego several times, mostly to the clothing store. Investigators spoke with employees of the store, and one of them said that on the day of the disappearance, Lindsay saw a similar girl in the company of an adult man. Nevertheless, this clue did not fit well into the supposed chronology of the events of that day. The police came to the conclusion that the girl could hardly have been in that store that very day, so they admitted that the employee simply confused something. He may have seen Lindsay and Marty a few days before. Investigators also looked at surveillance cameras and found no evidence of his words. At the same time, they continued to consider the possible involvement of the man in her disappearance and received a search warrant for his house. They were unable to find any evidence that Marty had anything to do with the case. In addition, he had a very reliable alibi at the time of her disappearance. The police began to doubt his involvement and continued to look for other suspects. They took a closer look at the guy Lindsay, and he also had an alibi. Having no other clues, the investigators decided to check another person, the girl's mother. There was no indication of her involvement, but the police had no other options. By that time, several weeks had passed since the girl's disappearance, and the woman was depressed by the lack of any news about the progress of the investigation. When the policeman called her and told her that they were going to go to her house, Mom thought about the long-awaited progress in this matter. She made coffee for them, laid out cookies, but instead of news, investigators brought her a search warrant for the house. They took with them a shovel and service dogs, searched all the premises and the backyard, but found nothing. The woman was annoyed by the fact that she was suspected of the disappearance of her own daughter. Even worse was the fact that in the months that followed, the case became completely frozen, since the investigators did not have any other clues. A year after the disappearance, the police again spoke with all participants in this case. The calculation was that the perpetrator of her disappearance could change his story, and it would be possible to cling to it. However, this did not bring the desired result. In subsequent years, there was also no progress. The girl's mother periodically walked around the city and pasted leaflets with information about her disappearance. "I hope to find new witnesses." 7 years after Lindsay's disappearance, The police reviewed the case and decided to refer it to the Unsolved Crimes Unit. There, he was taken up by Detective Larry Montgomery, who had a reputation for solving even the most hopeless cases. He began to carefully study all the available materials. This process lasted for 2 years. Larry came to the conclusion that Marty most likely had nothing to do with her disappearance. Based on all his testimony, the detective considered that the man really told the truth and was very worried about the girl. In addition, he himself came to Lindsay's mother after her disappearance. Given that none of the girl's acquaintances even knew his name, the man could have remained out of sight of the police altogether. The same goes for the guy Lindsay. The detective came to the conclusion that his involvement is unlikely. In addition to the fact that he had an alibi, the young man was really worried about his girlfriend. As a result, there was only one suspect left in front of him, Chris. When the detective got to the recording of his conversation with the police a year after the disappearance, several strange moments caught his eye. Firstly, the guy was talking about the girl in the past tense, although she was listed as missing, not dead. And secondly, he gave a strange answer when asked his opinion about the possible abduction of Lindsay. The policeman asked him what he thought should happen to the one who kidnapped the girl. Chris gave the most detached answer. He said probably this person should get some time in prison. It seemed to Larry that the guy was talking about his girlfriend and her fate, completely uninterested, as if he did not care about what happened to her. Then he decided to look at his alibi, the same one from the ATM camera next to his house, which hit Chris's car, and here he was waiting for a breakthrough. Larry noticed that the pickup truck in the video had black-cased rearview mirrors, while Chris's car had white mirrors. It turned out that the car on the record had nothing to do with Chris, and in fact he did not have an alibi. The detective began to study this man and went to Chris's 2 ex-girlfriends. They both told him almost the same thing. Chris was hot-tempered and violent, and often resorted to physical violence. One of them recalled how a guy took a hammer in front of her and killed his pet crab because he allegedly ate a fish from an aquarium. Next, Larry decided to check Chris's story about his actions the day after the disappearance of Lindsay. Initially, the guy said that he was at home, but this also turned out to be a lie. The detective studied the history of transactions on his bank cards, and he found that on that day he paid for gasoline in the city of Santa Clarita, located 100 kilometers from his home. Digging even deeper, the detective learned that Chris's father had a construction company, and in those years they carried out an order in Santa Clarita. Larry couldn't find any official record of Christum working, so he tracked down several employees involved in the project in 2001. All of them confirmed that the guy really worked with them and was a tractor driver. In addition, Larry found additional confirmation of their words. In those days, his bank card received amounts that could well be a gray salary for work. All this led the detective to alarming conclusions. The guy repeatedly lied to the police. He also went to a construction site where he had access to a tractor. Larry suggested that Chris could bury the girl's body there and decided to organize a search operation. But he had a serious problem in front of him. By that time, the construction had already been completed and the building was now located on the ground. For several months, the police inspected the area, using search dogs, but all this did not bring any results. Then the detectives decided to go for a trick. They found a young policewoman and asked her to pretend to be a student who works part-time at a local newspaper. She came to Chris's house, where he lived with his wife and child. The woman told him that she was writing material on the Lindsay case and asked him to answer a few questions. The man agreed, and then she said that the police had just discovered her remains. His reaction exceeded all the expectations of detectives. Chris turned white and said that he had no time to answer questions now and put the journalist out the door. Over the next few days, police raided his homes. They hoped that false information about the discovery of the remains would cause him to make the mistake of bringing them to Lindsay's body. A couple of days later, Chris left the house at about 3 a.m. and went somewhere. The police tried to discreetly follow him, but the man realized this and turned around and went to the nearest police station. There he reported that someone was chasing him and then returned home. After that, the detectives had only one option. They arrested Chris and brought him in for questioning. Given that there was not a single serious piece of evidence against him, the police needed his confession. Larry talked to him for almost an hour. He told him what they knew about the fake alibi, lies during interrogations, and so on. The detective tried to extract a confession from him using various tactics. In the end, he asked Chris if the murder was planned, and then he was waiting for the long-awaited breakthrough. The man replied no, and from that moment on, his confession began. The detective played along with him and said that he had to have some good reason to kill Lindsay, and if he told him the truth, the police will be able to help him. Then Chris said that that night he was going to take Lindsay home, but she herself offered to go to his apartment because she did not want to wake up her mother in the middle of the night. Once there, he tried to kiss her, but the girl pushed him away and said that she did not want to have any intimate relationship with him. Then Chris went to the kitchen, drank vodka, and came back intending to kiss her again. This time the girl was already asleep, and then the guy tried to pull off her clothes. Lindsay woke up and said she would call the police, then reached for her home phone. Chris was furious and tried to stop her, but the girl took the phone by the wire and hit him in the face with it. After that, Chris became enraged and attacked Lindsay and strangled her. Then he took the bodies out of the apartment, put them in the trunk, and took them to Santa Clarita, where he buried them at a local construction site. According to detectives, this story was partially fictional. Chris shot it in such a way as to create some reason for himself to commit this murder. The decisive factor was supposedly the fact that the girl hit him in the face with the phone. But there was one caveat. When the policeman first interrogated the guy, there were no abrasions or scratches on his face. Considering that, according to his story, Lindsay struck him with a heavy phone, this could not pass without a trace. However, the veracity of some details did not play a significant role, because in the hands of detectives was a confession of murder. They took Chris to the place where the construction site was located in 2001, and he showed them the approximate burial place. On the same day, the police took out a blue shoe that belonged to the girl from the ground, followed by her remains. Chris was charged with murder and the case was prepared for trial. Suddenly, the detectives faced one problem that could harm the entire investigation. After the man was arrested, he said something like, "I think a lawyer would not hurt me." According to the law, if a person requires a lawyer, he has no right to interrogate him. However, in this case, Chris did not formulate it as an explicit requirement. In connection with his proposal, it was decided not to regard this fact as a violation. However, otherwise, all the confessions of Chris could simply be considered invalid. However, the man himself did not deny his guilt and made a deal with the investigation. He agreed to confess to second-degree murder and received from 15 years in prison to life. He was 32 at the time of sentencing, so he will be able to be released at 47 if his request for early release is approved. It is noteworthy that Chris never showed remorse and regret for what he had done. Even during the interrogation after his confession, he asked only how long he could get and whether he would be given the death penalty. The man also said how much he felt better after removing this weight from his shoulders. Share your opinion in the comments and don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Thanks for watching.